I'm Marcus Coward, and this is Wake Up New Bedford, and I am here with President of BCC, Sedgewick Harris.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you again, and thank you so much for being here.
And thanks for having me.
Of course. So, please help paint a picture of who you are for the people who know you, but especially for those who don't. And you can start with, where are you from?
Where I'm from. Well, I come from the state of Michigan, small town, much smaller than I would say New Bedford, small town of Albion, Michigan. You know, when you grow up in Michigan as a kid, you learn that you can always tell people where you live with your right hand being the lower peninsula and your left hand being the upper peninsula.
Oh, interesting.
So I grew up in a little small town on the southwest side of Michigan, about an hour and 20 minutes to the west of Detroit. That usually gives people a proximity of the state. So I was on the far western side of the state. I grew up in a community that was very diverse, so very similar to New Bedford when you think about the diversity, and even of the South Coast, very diverse people and culture. Sure. And growing up there, everybody knew you. It was a very small community, so you know they knew who your parents were. They knew exactly who you belonged to, as my grandmother would say, and my aunts and uncle would say. So it was a very close-knit community as well. You know, by time you come out of elementary schools, and in its heyday, Albion had about 4 or 5 elementary schools. You were all piped into one middle school. Okay. So we all kind of came together in the 6th grade, and we kind of went through that rest of our higher educational, or not higher education, our secondary educational voyage with the same people and going through that. So it was a good experience. You know, was heavily engaged in a lot of activities, whether it be scholastic activities or sports activities, very highly involved in my community. It was uncommon for kids of African American descent to be engaged in certain things, but I was blessed to have a family who engaged in farming. We owned our own farm. Cool. And we raised Angus cattle as well as hogs, or swine as they say in the professional world. And you know, it was a source of income for my family, and that's how we worked. But my parents' major role in the city was my father worked at a steel mill, and my mother worked in a hospital. And if you know anything about Michigan, it's built on the car industry. And so growing up, we basically had that as the major breadwinner, but also our farm, where we actually kind of, like I said, raised livestock.
When you're younger, what activities are you getting involved in?
In Albion, there was a lot of focus on sports. It kept a lot of us engaged in something that kept us out of any type of mischief. I can remember this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. It was right around the time that Magic Johnson was getting very popular. He had left Michigan State after winning the national championship, went on to the LA Lakers, but he was really still committed to his communities and his community activists. He had a traveling softball team, and that softball team would come to Albion and play. And so we were really focused on a lot of programming that did have sports related to them. Sure. Some of the other things I got engaged in, there was a gentleman by the name of Harry Bonner Sr. He actually started what was called a drop-in center, and it gave kids the scholastics opportunity to engage themselves in what higher education is like, what is post-secondary education is like. He exposed us to places like Kellogg Community College, which I eventually ended up working for that actually community college. But he exposed me to, and a lot of my classmates, to Michigan State University, where we got a chance to be exposed to a major institution to see what college was really going to be like. We didn't always get a chance to know the finer details of it, but as much as he could give us and provide for us. But the major source of his programming did center around athletics. Sure. Many of us played basketball. Mr. Bonner was an avid baseball enthusiast, and so one of my first exposures to major league sports was going to a Tigers game. He took me to a Tigers game. And to be honest with the entire New Bedford community as well as the South Coast, unfortunately, that's the only team out of Michigan that I actually follow. So I hate to say it, but I don't root for the Red Sox when they play. I'm rooting for the Tigers.
You got to root for the hometown team.
I got to root for the hometown team. So, but Michigan State University exposed us to a lot of different things, a lot of different cultures. There was a program called Careers Unlimited in the summertime, starting at 11 or 12 years old, that we were able to go to. And we got exposed to people from different backgrounds. And what Careers Unlimited did at Michigan State, it brought kids from throughout the state of Michigan to Michigan State's campus. So I got a chance to meet students and other students from the Upper Peninsula. I got a chance to meet students from Flint and Saginaw and Detroit. But I also got to meet students from small rural communities that were similar to mine, but they happened to be people who were not of color. But we found out how many similarities we had. So that exposure took me beyond my own walls of Albion, Michigan, to be exposed to a lot of different things. So there's a lot to do there.
When you're young and getting exposed to all these different programs and experiences, do you have an idea of what you wanted to be when you grew up?
No idea. No clue.
Okay.
No clue. A lot of things ran through my head. I knew at an early age I did want to do something with people who were like me. And it didn't mean males. It didn't always mean African Americans. It didn't always mean just people of color. I knew I wanted to do something to help other people. My father was in an industry where in a wide or broad perspective, he helped people. He built car parts, and those car parts went to make sure that people could get on the road and be able to transport products or themselves from one place to another.
Yeah.
But my mother worked in a hospital, and she was a sterilization technician. And what that was, in the simple words, is all your instruments that were used in surgery or used in the doctor's office that needed to be reused, it was her job to get them, clean them, and make sure they were sterilized so they can go back out and be reused again in a very safe manner. So my mother had always been in the service field. But I was also raised in a church, and in that church I participated in a lot of things. I don't know why they had me in choir, because I can't sing, but they had me in choir. But one of the biggest service pieces that I participated in was being an usher. Being an usher at the church. I was part of the junior usher board. I eventually became one of the teen ushers, and just engaging in being a servant and serving other people. Through Mr. Bonner's program in the drop-in center was also a volunteer component. And so we would volunteer, whether it was at the elementary schools when we were in junior high, when we were in high school, we would go back to our middle school and volunteer. But we also do volunteer programs in the community. And it wasn't for pay. It was actually being a servant. Being a servant to your community. And I think that early on instilled in me that servant leadership was really important.
And so in high school, does all this just carry into it, or did you do something else?
Yeah, a lot of it carried into it, but for me, my major focus was athletics.
Oh, really?
I focused on doing the best I could, because coming out of what was then called and still called the Grandview Heights housing projects, there was not a lot of people who believed that individuals who came out of that environment were going on to higher education, in particularly, unless you had athletic ability. I watched many people who came out of the housing projects that I grew up in who went on to play sports. That was the way out. And so I focused on that, to the chagrin of my godfather, Harry Bonner Sr., when he really wanted me to focus not only on athletics, but he stressed how important the academic part was. But you didn't see a lot of that. I saw these young men and young women leaving my housing projects, going on to college, and I didn't really at that time recognize all the hard work that they had put in to their athletic, but more into their academic capabilities.
Sure.
And they really put forth a lot of effort to do those things, so they were very successful. I just didn't take advantage at the time. I didn't value how important the academic side of it was.
So were you doing basketball?
I was doing basketball. I played football, a little bit of baseball, a little bit of track, but my primary sport was basketball.
And so you go to college right after high school?
Yeah, well, I went to college. I went to a junior college. My academics caught up with me.
Sure, good.
And so I ended up having to go to a community college, which in today's presence that I'm in now, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow.
It was the absolutely best. I think if I would have went on to the four-year institution that I wanted to go to at that time, which was Eastern Michigan, I think I would have gotten lost.
Yeah.
I may not have done as well just because of the distractions.
Yeah.
Very similar to some of the community colleges I've worked for, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. I went to a small rural community college, Southwestern Michigan College, in the small town of Dowagiac, even further west from Detroit. It's probably about 2 hours or maybe an hour and a half to the east of Chicago. So I was on the far southwestern side of the state. Not too far from home, but far enough to kind of have a college experience. They didn't have residence halls. They do now, but they didn't have residence halls at the time, so I lived in an apartment, so I had to be able to cook, which I was lucky. My mother taught me that skill early on in life. But going to that community college was the best experience that I had coming out of high school, and the best choice that I could have made. It was a choice that I made, but it was probably the single option that I had. I could have went to other community colleges, but going to Southwestern Michigan made a great difference for me. It exposed me to people that I made lifelong friends with. It exposed me to an environment that was very different than what I had come from. Although rural, the people and the culture was very different. But I probably learned the biggest lesson when I was there.
What was that?
And when I went, I didn't understand the higher educational process. So, when I talk to young students today, I talk to them about the terminology of higher ed, how much is different. You don't withdraw from a class in high school, but in college, you have to withdraw. I didn't know what that meant.
Sure.
Had no clue what that was all about. And that's why I take orientation very seriously, being in the role that I'm in now as president, but previous to that being in vice president's roles of student affairs, where orientation and learning about the college is very critical to student success. And so what I learned from that experience is I walked away from a class that I thought, I know this stuff. Math is math. I know how to do this stuff. But I didn't understand what the withdrawal process was. I got my grades at the end of the semester, and I had failed this class.
Oh, wow.
Because I hadn't withdrawn from it. If I had withdrawn from it, I wouldn't have failed it, obviously.
Yeah.
But I still would have been potentially eligible to continue to play basketball because I was a student athlete there.
Sure. Okay.
And unfortunately for me, I was ineligible at that time. But I was sitting there, and I'll never forget it was like yesterday. I was sitting there, and a lady by the name of Carol Churchill, at the time she was the director of career services, asked me, "Hey, what's going on? What's going on with you? You look like you're distraught about something." I explained the situation. She took me by the hand and walked me through the process.
Wow.
This is what you have to do. This is what financial aid means. I tease kids when I go into orientation. I ask them, how many students here know what a bursar is?
Yeah, even still.
Yeah, people don't know what bursar. The bursar is where you go pay.
Yes,
It's where you make your payments
exactly.
at. And so I knew none of that terminology, and she really walked me through that process, got me re-enrolled for a winter session class, and by the spring term, I was eligible to continue playing basketball.
That's great.
So it was one of those processes for me that really set a tone for me to say, you know what? I really want to do something still that helps students, but I didn't think of this. When I graduated from Southwestern Michigan, I didn't participate in the ceremony because once again, I didn't know the process. I didn't know I had to apply for graduation. In high school, you just graduate.
Go. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know the process. And so I went to her and said, "Hey, Ms. Churchill, what can I do for you?" And her remarks to me and her response to me was so vivid, and it rings in my ear today, is she just told me, pay it forward. Help the next generation to come through. Make sure those students don't have the same problems or make the same mistakes you made.
Yeah.
So go back to your high school, talk about your experience. And so I've been doing that for a lifetime and going back and sharing the message. What better place, what better position to do it in than being the president of a college, to share with the majority of students who come into the higher ed system, and particularly community college, are what are considered first generational students. First generational students are students whose parents don't have at least a bachelor's degree, not an associate's degree, but a bachelor's degree upon graduation or upon entering college. So I was a first generation student, but my children were not first generational students, because by the time they went on to college, I had a bachelor's degree, I had a master's degree. And as my son entered college, I was done with my doctoral degree. But I consider Southwestern Michigan such a vital point in me being here today. And without Carol, without Southwestern Michigan giving me that opportunity, I don't think I would be here. There's not a possible way, but I wouldn't do it any differently, because that experience really gave me the opportunity to share my knowledge and my experience with the next generation of students. And once again, as Carol asked me to do, pull the next ones through.
So during this whole time, I've been just curious, does your family still have this farm?
No.
Okay.
No, we don't. We don't. My dad was very smart. I'm the oldest of 3 boys.
Okay.
And one of the things that happened is once his free labor left the house,
Sure.
he let that go. So so he's a very smart man. He may not have as much education as me, but a very smart man.
And now, was that something you missed? Like, how big of a part was the farm to you personally?
Personally, it taught me work ethic.
Sure.
It also gives you a perspective of what you put into something is what you'll get out of it. I watched how meticulous my father was about how he took care of those animals and how he fed them, when he fed them, what he fed them, how he took care of, building a barn and having shelter for the animals and making sure that he had the right types of medications if animals got sick, tending to them when birthing took place. When there were piglets being born or calves being born, how much he really took care and was mindful of those things. So I learned a lot from my experience of observing him and how he cared for the land and the property. It was a pride piece, and I see that now in a lot of things that I've been able to do, my family's been able to do. We take great pride in making sure that when we're giving information or we're giving direction, we want it to be as accurate as possible. And I hope to take that same mentality and implement it and heighten what we do currently at Bristol.
Sure.
Because I think Bristol is a great place. We do a lot of great things, but there's always opportunity to grow and get better.
Do you still go back to Michigan? Do you still have family there?
Yeah. My parents are still there. My mom and dad are still there. My brother is still there. I have a middle brother that passed away, but my parents and most of my family is still there. My mother's sisters, my dad's brothers, they're all still there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you did go to college, what did you major in?
Well, that's an interesting story. Because of my middle brother John, he had a blood disorder. My original thought to go to school was to be a doctor. I wanted to be a medical doctor. I watched how he experienced going to the hospital, and I always would say I wanted to make a person who had his disability or his health concern, I wanted to make sure that the next kid that had that didn't have a painful experience, because I would watch my brother. The thought of being a doctor was at the top of my list. Then I got into, once again, talking with Carol, what does it take to be a doctor?
Yeah.
I knew I could play 4 years of sports, but it takes a lot longer to be a doctor.
Yeah.
So that went out the window.
Okay.
I would tell you, and I've shared this with a lot of students who are undecided, it's okay. It's okay to be undecided. I changed my majors 4, maybe 5 times in my first 2 years of college.
Wow.
Because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I spent the time exploring. I spent the time finding things out. I did a co-op in teaching. I thought elementary school teaching. What's the best thing about elementary school? You get 2 recesses, and I was going to be taller than everybody, so I didn't have to worry about that. So it was one of those things where I thought, yeah, we can do this. But I started looking at what they get paid, and I said, you know what? Let me talk to somebody. So I went back to my high school, going into my sophomore year, and I talked to my history teacher, one of my favorite teachers, Mr. Gray, and after talking to him, it was my goal that I was going to be a teacher back at Albion High School, and then I was going to coach basketball. That's what I was going to do. That was my goal. And
why was that conversation so impactful?
Well, Mr. Gray was a person who really cared about students, and like anything and anybody, you take and you value what people say from people you trust.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I trusted Mr. Gray. I trusted his perspective. I trusted that he had my best intentions in mind.
Yeah.
And when we had that conversation, I thought, that's what I want to do. But once again, exposure changes everything. You know? Exposure to different cultures, exposure to different regions of the United States. You know. So after leaving Southwestern Michigan Community College, I went all the way to Oklahoma. I was at Northwestern Oklahoma State University, where I obtained a basketball scholarship to play basketball out there.
Okay.
And in my 2 years out there, once again, exposed to a lot of different things and figured out, man, teaching is not what I really want to do. I don't think I want to teach. That exposure to elementary school was something that I thought, I don't know. And that was one of the reasons I went back to talk to Mr. Gray, because after 2.5 days in a kindergarten classroom, I was done.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. A lot of moving parts, a lot of little people moving.
Yeah.
I was done. And so having that conversation, I knew high school history, I would do that, and then I would coach basketball. I could make a living. I would be good.
Yeah.
So that's what I thought, going into my junior and senior year. But when I got out to Oklahoma, I really was exposed to a lot of different things. Once again, the area where I was in, northwestern Oklahoma, there was indigenous reservations there. I got a chance to be exposed to the teaching on those reservations.
Okay.
And found out that people don't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then I started to ask questions back home. How much do teachers make? I would talk to Mr. Gray. How much? And I was like, that's not a lot of money. That's not a lot of money, and I'm worried about that. I'm thinking, well, let me try something different. And actually, this is a home away from home, because my major ended up being mass communication with emphasis on public relations and marketing.
Oh, interesting.
So that's what my degree, my undergraduate degree, was in.
Say that again.
It was mass communications.
Mass communications.
With the emphasis on public relations and marketing.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So I actually had the opportunity to be exposed to radio, TV broadcasting. As I was telling folks earlier today before we got on set, I spent a lot of time in radio.
Sure.
I used to tell people I have a face for radio. It was really fun being on the radio. I did play-by-play for my high school basketball team when I came back home after graduating. So being exposed to different things has taken me in full circle, but never in that circle was it you're going to be a community college administrator, or you're going to be an adjunct faculty member teaching communications. You're going to be teaching students the way to enroll in college. None of that was ever in the picture. So
do you end up pursuing the communications field at all?
Not really.
Okay.
I got into grant writing because my godfather was really big in writing grants to keep his organization running. So I got into writing grants and watching him orchestrate how to run a business. Through that, I ended up, and this is really interesting. I worked in the private sector, so I worked for Washington Heights Community Ministries early in my career. It was a nonprofit United Methodist Church that had a after school and not preschool, but before school program.
Okay.
It was in a low social economic area, so these were students who were like me, coming up in the projects, dealing with being low income, first generational. These were students that I could relate to. So I worked there for 4 years. I met my wife there.
Okay.
We ended up getting married, and when we found out we were going to have our first child, I figured, once again, I got to make more money than this. Now I got a mouth to feed. And so I ended up working for a substance abuse agency that was contracted by the state of Michigan in the private sector, and made really good money.
Okay.
After a while, that wasn't really what I wanted to do. That was kind of a tough side of serving people.
Yeah.
Working in the juvenile homes, working with parolees and people who were on parole or probation, who had substance abuse problems, and I was helping people get into rehab or get into some type of program to help them, stay off drugs and avoid drugs and get into some type of occupational skill set. So I started to use Kellogg Community College because I was in Battle Creek. Long story short, I went to a meeting that my godfather couldn't make, and I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ken Atwater. He was the current vice president of student services at Kellogg. He kind of talked to me about a job opportunity, and that's where it all started in 1997. January 97, I walked into Kellogg Community College, and that was my first stint, and I've been in higher ed ever since.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really can't plan out the path that you're going to take.
Right.
You just have to be open to the opportunities.
You got to be open to the opportunities. You got to be open to wherever the wind may blow into your sail. You know, you do have the opportunity and the ability to be on the ship and be in the right seat. But sometimes the sails or the winds will take you in a different direction, and you got to be prepared for that. I mean, I think that happens, and it shows the true character of a person that you can adapt to those different situations, because you never know, once again, how this will come full circle. You know, one of the things, Marcus, that I didn't share, but I will share this is,
Please.
I think early on in my high school career, and I have to thank Vivian Davis, who was my high school counselor starting my sophomore year, but my current high school counselor was a person who just didn't understand students that were challenged with understanding what higher education was all about. And my high school counselor at the time shared with me that it would probably be in my best interest, when you talked about the path, getting me on the right path, that it would probably be in my best interest to go to the military.
Okay.
And the reason and the definition behind that decision is that if I went to college, it would be a waste of my time and somebody else's money.
Wow.
Mrs. Davis, who was the other counselor at the time, heard that comment. A few days later, she came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about college?" And I shared verbatim what my counselor at the time told me. By the time I came back to school for my sophomore year in high school, Miss Davis was my counselor. And from that point, she started putting those building blocks in place. She started making sure that I had opportunities and access. She also knew that I was a student athlete, and that if college was the way for me to get out, that the military wouldn't offer me that opportunity potentially. Now, I will say this, I do have a cousin who did go to the Army, served in the armed forces, and actually once he completed his 4-year stint, he actually came out and played basketball in college, because he had that opportunity to play. And I think, once again, that was just things that we didn't know about at the time. That exposure, absolutely. So I just think that a lot of times students don't know what they really want to do, but don't let someone predict your future. You're the author of your future, so write it. And sometimes writing takes you in a different direction. You know, you're talking about this and it takes you over here, but that's okay. It's okay to actually have that indecisiveness at times, but at the end of the day, be your own author. Be the person that writes your own story. Don't let anybody else write it for you.
You have to.
Yeah.
It's your story.
It is.
No one else can write it for you.
That's right.
And
that's right.
You really do just have to be able to adapt.
Right.
And what I was thinking about when you were making that ship analogy was, you have to adapt to the winds in your sails, but no matter what, you can't control the water.
Can't always control it.
And the water's gonna, you can maybe predict some things or expect how the water is going to move you, but you can't control it.
Yep. Yeah. But a true captain of a ship will understand how to navigate the treacherous waters, and that's the key.
Yes. That's
the key piece. You know, there's a poem that I learned, I don't know if you've ever heard it, it's called Invictus. Oh, no. There's a movie called Invictus about the South American soccer team. But Invictus is a poem that was read by Nelson Mandela every day that he was incarcerated. Oh. And at the end of the poem, there's a part that says, "I'm the master of my faith. I'm the captain of my soul." Yeah. And I share that with students during orientation, because I am the captain, I'm the master of my fate, is talking, you have the control to do what you need to do. But being the captain of your soul means you have to look within yourself to make sure that you're prepared for the decisions that you have to make, whether it be for you, and in my case, as I got older, it was for me and my family. Yeah.
So that beautifully wraps up part one. All right. And so thank you everyone for watching. Watch in part 2 as we talk more about his long, illustrious career in community colleges. This has been president of Bristol Community College, Sedgewick Harris. Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And we're going to continue this conversation in part 2. Please tune in, and thank you for watching. Peace.